In every city, there are stories that never made the papers, not because they weren't important, but because they were inconvenient. This isn't where justice always wins. This is where the echoes remain. This is reverberating noir. The fog does not lift, it settles, like something that has decided to stay. November 1888. The kind of cold that finds the space between your ribs and makes a home there. A woman walks alone through Whitechapel. Her shawl is thin. Her breath makes ghosts in the air that vanish before they finish forming. She has walked these streets before. She knows where the gas lamps flicker and where they go dark entirely. She knows. Tonight, she is not wrong to be afraid.
We are not here to give him another name. We are here to understand why the name already carved into the walls of that district still echoes.
The year begins in April. Emma Elizabeth Smith is attacked by 2 men, perhaps 3. She survives long enough to speak their names. She does not survive what comes after. Peritonitis takes her the following day. Most scholars call it unrelated, a gang attack in a district that has no shortage of them. But she is the first body that police will later try to fit into a pattern that refuses to hold.
The first death that belongs to this story may not belong to this story at all. That should tell you something about how this narrative was built.
August 7th. Martha Tabram climbs the stairs of a lodging house on George Street. She will not come down them. 39 stab wounds. An excess that suggests not precision but frenzy. Some will call her the first, Inspector Abeline among them, years later. The wound pattern disagrees.
39 wounds is not a signature. It is an argument. The Ripper, if there is a single Ripper, will later demonstrate economy. Martha Tabram demonstrates something else entirely.
August 31st, Bucks Row. Mary Ann Nichols is found on the cobblestones, her throat open twice, her abdomen torn. The press does not yet have a name for what it is looking at. It will find one soon enough. Detectives Abeline, Moore and Andrews are summoned from Scotland Yard. The Metropolitan Police have decided this is something new. They are not wrong.
Polly Nichols. She was housed once in the Peabody buildings, respectable tenements for the deserving poor. Indoor lavatories, gas-heated water. A daughter of a blacksmith who had, for a time, fallen upward. Then her husband took a lover, and the Peabody became a memory, and the workhouse became a door. And the streets became the only thing left.
1 week later, September 8th, 29 Hanbury Street. Annie Chapman's body lies in the backyard, her throat cut, her intestines placed over her shoulders. Part of her uterus is missing. The pathologist, George Bagster Phillips, will suggest the killer possesses anatomical knowledge. Enough to excise organs in a single motion, practiced. Other experts will disagree. The suggestion will not disappear.
Annie Chapman, the daughter of a military officer, educated, once capable of a life that included letters and reading and doors that opened. Alcohol took those doors and locked them from the inside. By the time she reaches Hanbury Street, she is carrying her belongings in a red handkerchief. She has asked a man for a belt earlier that night. He refuses her. He is the last person to see her alive who will be believed.
September 30th, the night the newspapers will call the double event. Elizabeth Stride is found in Dutfield's yard at 1 a.m. Her throat cut, her abdomen untouched. 44 minutes later, Catherine Eddowes lies in Mitre Square. The same wound to the throat, but here the abdomen has been opened. Her kidney and uterus removed. The killer had time with Eddowes. With Stride, something pulled him away.
Elizabeth Stride, Swedish immigrant. She ran a coffee house once, served customers, had a home that smelled of something other than river fog and coal smoke. She also posed as a disaster victim to solicit charity. That detail survives not because it damns her, but because it reveals how survival demanded invention. She was not a passive figure waiting to be found.
Catherine Eddowes, unusually literate. She transcribed ballads for her common-law partner. She sold poetry pamphlets across England. A woman who understood language well enough to reshape it. An abusive relationship drove her to the streets. Her body was found with a piece of her earlobe missing. The letters had promised to clip the ears of the next victim.
The correspondence arrived like clockwork. September 27th, a letter to the Central News Agency. Dear Boss, the writer mocks police efforts, promises more blood, signs a name that will outlive empires. Initially dismissed as a hoax. Then Eddowes' ear.
The letter from hell, delivered to George Lusk, president of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, October 16th. Inside a small box. A human kidney, shrunken, preserved. A note, 2 words. From hell.
Eddowes had a kidney removed. Police could never confirm the organ in the box was hers. The letter may be genuine. It may be a fabrication by someone who read the papers and understood what sold them. The voice of Jack the Ripper, as we know it, was largely written by journalists.
November 9th. Miller's Court. Mary Jane Kelly, 24 years old, the youngest of the 5. She has a room here. A private room. The only victim to die indoors. The killer has time. The mutilation exceeds everything that came before. Her face hacked beyond recognition, her organs scattered. Some accounts claim her heart was taken.
Mary Jane Kelly. She may have narrowly escaped sex traffickers in Paris before returning to London. That detail, if true, suggests a woman who understood danger and chose her paths accordingly. Miller's Court was not her choice. It was what remained.
These 5 deaths, Nichols, Chapman, Stride, Eddowes, Kelly, they form the canonical core that most historians attribute to a single perpetrator. Later deaths will be debated. Rose Millet, Alice Mackenzie, Francis Coles, the Pinchin Street torso, each one added to the pile, each one impossible to fit cleanly.
Now, let us look at what the pattern actually suggests. Not the legend, the lines beneath it. The timing. The murders cluster around bank holidays and weekends. The district's population swells. Police presence, thin to begin with, thins further. The killer understood windows. The geography. All but one of the canonical murders occur within a tight radius. Bucks Row, Hanbury Street, Dutfield's Yard, Mitre Square, Miller's Court. Someone who knew those alleys. Someone who could slip between them without thinking. Not a visitor. The methodology evolves. Nichols and Chapman display the throat slash and abdominal mutilation. Stride lacks the evisceration. Interruption is the simplest explanation. Eddowes returns to the full pattern. Kelly, with privacy and time, exceeds it. Progression, confidence, or a need that grows with each feeding.
Or different hands.
That possibility cannot be eliminated. The press needed a single monster. Society has always preferred one monster to many small ones. A single name that explains everything. It is cleaner. It is easier. It lets the rest of us stand at a distance.
The organ removal. Baxter Phillips believed the killer understood anatomy. Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown, the police surgeon, agreed.
He said the killer must have had considerable knowledge of the position of the organs.
That phrase has echoed for over a century. But anatomical knowledge in 1888 did not require medical school.
Butchery was common. Slaughterhouses operated throughout the East End. The trade of knackers, those who rendered animal carcasses, was commonplace. A man accustomed to cutting open animals might translate that skill to human tissue with a horrifying ease. Not a surgeon, a tradesman. The legend preferred the surgeon.
The ability to evade capture. Beat constables walk set routes at predictable intervals. Someone who knew those schedules could time movements precisely. Slip between patrols. Be gone before the next light fell on the yard or the square.
This points to residence, not passage. The Ripper, if we keep that name, likely lived within walking distance of every murder site. He had a bed to return to, a door to close behind him. He went home.
The letters reveal something else. A mind that craves notoriety. The willingness to manipulate. The understanding of how press machinery works. A macabre humour that finds amusement in authorities' failure.
This suggests education. Enough to compose coherent prose. Enough to follow an argument. But also a deep need to feel powerful in a world that had likely marginalized him. Marginalized men build legends around their own names when they cannot build anything else.
Now we step into territory that facts alone cannot map. Open speculation, clearly named as such. What if the Ripper was not a single monster, but a syndrome born of the district's own condition? Multiple men shaped by the same brutal circumstances. Poverty, alcohol, lack of opportunity. Each capable of violence. Each operating in the same shadow. The press, hungry for a simple narrative, stitched these events into one figure.
The theory has merit. It does not comfort us. A single monster can be caught. A condition requires dismantling. We prefer the monster.
Another angle. The women who died were invisible to polite society until their bodies made that invisibility impossible. The murders forced a confrontation with a class that preferred to forget. In that light, the crimes become a grotesque and unintended catalyst, a horror that illuminated the conditions which created it.
The victims were not random. They were selected by circumstance, by the absence of safety nets, by a society that had already abandoned them. The killer found them because they were findable, because no one else was looking.
The real monster may have been far more mundane than the legend allows. A local violent offender whose deeds were amplified beyond recognition by a media machine hungry for copy. In that version, the newspapers created Jack the Ripper. The man himself was just another shadow in Whitechapel.
And yet, the pattern persists. The timing, the geography, the evolution of method. Either we are looking at a singular mind operating over 5 weeks, or we are looking at an ecosystem of violence that produced the appearance of one.
The ripple effect. The Whitechapel Vigilance Committee formed in response, local volunteers walking the streets at night. They never caught the killer, but their existence signaled something. The community was no longer willing to rely on distant authority.
Reforms followed. Housing initiatives accelerated. Sewer systems were upgraded. Public health gained traction. The killer's legacy includes cleaner streets and better lit alleys. Improvements that came at the cost of lives we are only now beginning to remember by name.
The cultural ripple extends further. Jack the Ripper became the archetype, the unknown stalker. That figure has haunted literature, film, and television for over a century. Each retelling reflects the anxieties of its era, the fear of the stranger, the dread of urban decay, the fascination with evil that hides just beneath civilization's surface.
But let us return to what should never have been lost. The women. Mary Ann Nichols, Polly, daughter of a blacksmith, housed once in buildings with indoor lavatories and gas-heated water. A discovery of her husband's infidelity sent her spiraling through the workhouse and onto the streets. Her last breath drawn on cold cobblestones in Buck's Row. Annie Chapman, educated daughter of a military officer. Her alcoholism closed doors that her birthright had opened. Her last hours spent asking a man for a belt to hold together what was already falling apart. Elizabeth Stride, Swedish immigrant who ran a coffee house, who reinvented herself when reinvention was all she had left, who died in a yard off Burner Street with her dreams cut short and her throat opened. Catherine Eddowes, unusually literate, a woman who sold poetry pamphlets and transcribed ballads. An abusive relationship took everything else. She was reduced to a headline before her name could be fully remembered. Mary Jane Kelly, the youngest, perhaps the most resilient. A possible escape from traffickers. A woman who understood danger and still kept walking. Who died in a cramped room on Dorset Street because there was nowhere else left to go.
These were mothers, daughters, sisters, friends. Their deaths left holes in families that never fully healed.
Hallie Rubenhold wrote a book called The Five. Its purpose was not to add another chapter to the Ripper's legend. It was to restore the identities of women who had been reduced to victimhood. To tell their stories not as endings defined by a monster, but as lives shaped and ultimately ended by a society that refused to see them.
The fog has lifted over Whitechapel. The cobblestones have been repaved, the gas lamps replaced with electric light, and yet the name still carries weight, still produces a shiver. Jack the Ripper. 3 words that have outlasted empires. But if we listen beneath the legend, we hear the echo of footsteps on damp stone, the hurried breath of women trying to make it home before dark, and the quiet, relentless tide of a society that, for too long, looked away.
The Ripper may never be unmasked. Perhaps that is fitting. Some mysteries endure not because they conceal a villain, but because they force us to confront the uncomfortable truths of our own time.
The real question is not who was Jack the Ripper. It is what does his story compel us to see in ourselves and our cities today? What shadows are we creating by looking away? What names are we refusing to speak? If this episode has held your attention, if the weight of those names has settled into you the way fog settles into a district, then share this with someone who deserves to carry the question forward. Subscribe. Return. The dark rooms we enter here are never truly left.
Justice begins not with catching a monster. It begins with building a world where monsters have no place to grow. And that work does not end. It never ends.
And so the file closes. But the case doesn't. Not for the families. Not for the witnesses who still pause before answering questions. Not for a city that remembers, even when it pretends not to. The evidence sits somewhere in a box. The photographs fade. The names are spoken less often.
And as long as the questions are still unanswered, the case isn't over. It's just waiting for someone to look again.
And here, it keeps reverberating.